Savannah Brooks thought she had found her fairy tale ending with Christopher Hale. Charming, successful, and everything she'd ever dreamed of in a husband. But just hours after their picture-perfect wedding, she was dead. Now, the man she married is at the center of a murder investigation that uncovers lies, hidden identities, and a conspiracy so twisted it stunned an entire nation. This is the chilling story of the wedding night betrayal, the shocking story of murder. Savannah Lark had spent nearly 2 years planning the most beautiful day of her life. Her wedding was a dream come true. Flawlessly organized, deeply romantic, and held at a historic Charleston estate that overlooked the marshes glowing under the golden afternoon sun. She wore an ivory gown with delicate lace sleeves and a flowing veil that danced in the breeze. Guests watched in awe as she walked down the aisle toward Christopher Hale, the man she believed was her soulmate. He stood confidently in a tailored navy suit, smiling as if nothing in the world could go wrong. To their friends and family, they looked perfect together, young, successful, and in love. Christopher had proposed after only 6 months of dating, catching Savannah completely off guard, but leaving her smitten. He seemed like everything she had hoped for in a partner. Stable, charming, affectionate, and ambitious. A respected real estate agent with connections across the East Coast, Christopher knew how to win people over, and he did just that. First with Savannah, then with her inner circle. Her friends adored him, her parents approved, and Savannah convinced herself that life had finally rewarded her for all the years of heartbreak and false starts. The reception was held beneath a canopy of string lights and magnolia trees. The couple danced to their favorite song while guests cheered and clapped. The air was filled with champagne toasts and laughter. No one suspected that beneath the surface of this fairy tale scene, something was very wrong. Savannah, who had always trusted her instincts, had started to feel a subtle unease in the weeks leading up to the wedding. She had dismissed it as pre-wedding jitters, nerves, stress, and the pressure to make everything perfect. But that night, as she and Christopher left the celebration and arrived at the secluded honeymoon suite, the tension quietly grew. They checked into a high-end coastal inn that Savannah had picked herself. The suite overlooked the ocean, and a bottle of chilled champagne awaited them inside. Candles flickered on the bathroom counter, and rose petals were scattered across the bed. Savannah had wanted this night to feel like a soft landing, after months of intense planning. But something felt off. Christopher had grown unusually quiet. He moved through the room mechanically. His smiles felt forced, and he kept glancing at his phone when he thought Savannah wasn't looking. Still, she tried to stay positive. She changed into a silk nightgown and removed her wedding jewelry, while Christopher stepped into the bathroom. The last sound she ever heard was the pop of the champagne cork. The following morning, hotel staff were summoned to the room after several unanswered knocks. Inside, they found Christopher sitting on the bed in silence, his hands trembling, staring at the bathroom door. Savannah's body was discovered in the bathtub, her head tilted to the side, her skin pale and motionless beneath the water. Her wedding dress, now soaked and stained, clung to her like a ghost of the night before. The scene was deeply disturbing, far more violent than any accidental death should have looked. When police arrived, they found Christopher dazed, claiming that he had woken up and found her like that. He insisted they had gone to bed together and that she must have slipped and hit her head during the night. But officers noted several things that didn't make sense. There was broken glass on the bathroom floor, bruises around Savannah's neck, and a faint trail of blood leading from the edge of the tub to the sink. Christopher had scratches on his wrist and a faint red mark on the side of his neck. He said he didn't remember how they got there. From the very beginning, the case had too many inconsistencies. The fairy tale wedding had ended not in happily ever after, but in death. The question everyone began asking was how a bride could be murdered just hours after saying, "I do," and whether the man she married was exactly who he claimed to be. Detectives began their investigation with a growing sense of unease. Nothing about Savannah Lark's death felt like a tragic accident. There were too many details that didn't line up, too many shadows hiding behind what should have been the happiest night of her life. As forensic experts processed the honeymoon suite, more questions emerged. The champagne bottle on the table was still mostly full, the wedding cake left untouched. Her makeup was half removed, as if she had been interrupted midway through her nightly routine. There was no sign of forced entry, no signs of a struggle outside the bathroom. Yet, her body had clearly suffered more than what could be explained by a simple fall. Christopher Hale's version of the story began to crumble almost immediately. He told detectives he had gone to sleep shortly after arriving at the hotel, and that Savannah had wanted to soak in a bath alone to relax. He claimed he had taken a sleeping pill, explaining why he hadn't heard anything during the night. But when the toxicology report came back, there were no sleeping pills in his system, and the surveillance cameras in the hallway revealed even more contradictions. At 12:47 a.m., Christopher was seen exiting the suite wearing a hoodie and jeans. He returned roughly 20 minutes later, carrying a small white bag. Then, at 2:12 a.m., he left again, this time wearing gloves, and didn't return for almost an hour. When asked about the late-night outings, Christopher gave vague explanations. He said he went for a walk to clear his head. Then he said he went to look for a vending machine. But the hotel clerk recalled something different. At around 1 a.m., Christopher had approached the front desk, asking for bleach and extra towels, claiming that Savannah had gotten sick and made a mess in the bathroom. The clerk found it strange. Guests usually asked housekeeping for such things, not bleach in the middle of the night. Still, the items were handed over, and Christopher disappeared back into the room. The autopsy report revealed bruising along Savannah's arms, shoulders, and neck. There were no signs of drugs or alcohol in her system, and the injury pattern suggested she had been held down. The medical examiner listed her cause of death as asphyxiation by drowning, but noted the presence of forced trauma to the back of her head and upper spine. She hadn't simply slipped. She had been overpowered. When police began going through Savannah's phone, they found a scheduled calendar event for the next morning labeled simply Private Meeting 9 a.m. The location was a coffee shop near downtown Charleston, and the name listed beside it read J. Cole Investigations. Savannah had planned to meet with a private investigator. The wedding had barely ended, and she already had reason to dig into her husband's past. But what had she found? It didn't take long to locate J. Cole Investigation. The investigator, a retired police officer named Jacob Cole, confirmed that Savannah had hired him just 3 weeks before the wedding. She had requested a background check on Christopher Hale. Her reason was simple. She had come across a disturbing message in an anonymous email. The sender claimed that Christopher had been married before, and that his previous wife had died under circumstances similar to what would later happen to Savannah. She had grown suspicious after noticing that Christopher never talked about his past, kept no family photos, and seemed evasive about his life before moving to Charleston. Jacob had only just begun his investigation when the wedding occurred, but he had already uncovered disturbing facts. Christopher had changed his last name 3 years ago, and before becoming Hale, he had gone by Christopher Mallory. Under that name, he had indeed been married to a woman named Elena Mallory in Oregon. Elena had drowned in a bathtub 3 weeks after her wedding, just like Savannah. The police in Charleston reached out to their counterparts in Oregon. The similarities were undeniable. Both women were young, healthy, newly married, and both had died alone in bathtubs shortly after exchanging vows with Christopher. The Oregon case had been ruled accidental, but now it demanded a second look. As investigators in 2 states began piecing together a timeline, the truth about Christopher Hale, or whoever he really was, began to surface. Savannah had gotten too close to the truth. She had planned to confront her new husband after the wedding, but she never got the chance. And now, the man she trusted with her life stood at the center of a twisted, possibly premeditated pattern of betrayal and death. With 2 nearly identical deaths now linked to the same man, detectives widened their investigation into Christopher Hale, formerly Christopher Mallory. They searched deeper into his past, beyond the polished smile and perfect suits he had presented to the world. Behind the curated image was a man with a troubling trail of secrets and a history he had worked hard to bury. They traced his movements across multiple states, discovering a pattern of rapid relocations, short-lived jobs, and a consistent habit of disappearing right after something went wrong. It was as if Christopher had been shedding old skins for years, each time starting over with a new identity and a new woman. The case in Oregon, previously closed without much scrutiny, was reopened. Elena Mallory had died just 25 days after marrying Christopher. Her family had always been suspicious, especially her sister, who recalled bruises on Elena's body during the funeral. At the time, Christopher claimed Elena had slipped while reaching for a towel. There had been no autopsy, no thorough investigation. Christopher had cremated her body quickly and moved to another state less than a week later. He cut all contact with her family, citing the pain of grief. That same month, he legally changed his last name. This time, however, authorities weren't moving on so easily. They began cross-referencing other deaths of women connected to Christopher. In Illinois, they found records of a girlfriend who had suffered a fall from a balcony. It was ruled a suicide, but the woman's mother had never believed that story. In North Carolina, another former girlfriend had filed a restraining order against him, citing emotional abuse and surveillance. She had claimed that Christopher was obsessed with control, that he isolated her from friends and tracked her movements. Her complaint was dismissed in court, but now it became a vital part of a growing narrative. Christopher Hale didn't just lie. He manipulated, planned, and vanished when it suited him. Meanwhile, in Charleston, police obtained a warrant to search the couple's home. There they found Savannah's laptop, which she had last used a week before the wedding. Her search history painted a chilling picture. She had looked up phrases like how to know if someone is hiding their identity, signs of a psychopath, and private investigator near me. She had bookmarked an article titled Widows Who Suspect Murder. Investigators also found an encrypted file on her desktop labeled Truth. Inside was a PDF compiled by Jacob Cole, the investigator she had hired. It included Christopher's name change, his prior marriage, and a list of locations he had lived in over the past 10 years. She had printed it out, and police later found a folded copy tucked inside her wedding planning binder. Savannah had planned something. She was waiting. Perhaps she wanted to confirm everything before the honeymoon. Maybe she didn't want to ruin the wedding day for her family. Maybe she was afraid. But the evidence made one thing clear. She had known something wasn't right. Her death was no longer a mystery. It was an alarm bell that had gone unheard just one day too late. Christopher, now in custody, refused to speak. He declined interviews and would not answer questions, choosing instead to sit silently during every interrogation. His lawyer issued a short statement claiming that the police were building a narrative based on coincidences, insisting there was no concrete proof he had killed Savannah. But the mountain of evidence was growing, and public opinion had already turned against him. Media outlets picked up the story, dubbing him the wedding night killer. Old acquaintances began calling in with strange memories and unsettling anecdotes. One former co-worker described Christopher as charming but cold, someone who always seemed to say the right thing but never connected on a deeper level. Another woman claimed he once bragged about being able to read people like books. Detectives continued interviewing people from Christopher's past, digging into the financial side of things. What they found next shifted the investigation from suspicion to certainty. Just days before Savannah's wedding, Christopher had taken out a large life insurance policy on her, naming himself as the sole beneficiary. The policy would only activate after marriage, and the payout? $2 million. Now, it wasn't just a tragic love story gone wrong, it was a calculated plan. Savannah hadn't just married a liar, she had unknowingly signed her own death warrant. As investigators unraveled the tangled threads of Christopher Hale's life, the story shifted from suspicion to methodical horror. The life insurance policy, worth $2 million, had been signed and finalized just 5 days before Savannah and Christopher's wedding. According to the policy documents, Savannah had signed the form herself, likely unaware of the implications, but a handwriting expert raised immediate doubts. The signature didn't perfectly match previous samples of her writing. That discovery prompted further analysis. Experts confirmed what police had begun to suspect. Her signature had been forged. Authorities subpoenaed Christopher's emails and financial records, uncovering even more damning details. His bank accounts showed large transfers to offshore locations, with accounts opened under different variations of his name. There were also transactions to a company that didn't seem to exist on paper, a shell corporation created weeks before the wedding. That corporation had been used to funnel money through various states, muddying the trail in a way that suggested planning and financial fraud at a high level. Detectives then turned their attention to a hidden storage unit Christopher had rented under a false name 3 towns away from Charleston. Inside, they found a trove of disturbing items: multiple IDs with Christopher's photograph but different names, disposable phones, SIM cards, and a collection of personal belongings belonging to Savannah and, disturbingly, Elena Mallory. There were photos, journals, a wedding ring that wasn't Savannah's, and a burned-out hard drive labeled. Forensic teams recovered partial data from the drive and discovered encrypted folders containing surveillance photos, voice recordings, and documents chronicling Savannah's daily routines. There were even notes about her fears, her online activity, and her conversations with friends, things she had never told anyone except people she trusted. Somehow, Christopher had been tracking her for weeks, maybe longer. Savannah wasn't just a random victim. She had been targeted, chosen. Christopher had been watching her, manipulating her life behind the scenes, creating problems only he could fix, and presenting himself as the solution. This pattern of psychological control matched the earlier restraining order filed by a former girlfriend, the one dismissed years ago. Now, those ignored warning signs became key pieces of a pattern that extended beyond Savannah and Elena. Analysts working on the case began digging into missing persons reports across various states, searching for other potential victims who might have crossed paths with Christopher during his years of wandering. Back in Charleston, the community was in shock. Savannah had been a beloved figure, active in local charities, a popular art teacher, someone who brought people together. Her sudden death and the unraveling mystery surrounding it gripped the entire city. Her friends recalled that she had seemed quieter in the weeks leading up to the wedding. She had smiled less, taken fewer photos, and seemed more distracted. Many now saw those signs as cries for help that had gone unheard. As the trial preparations began, prosecutors assembled a case built not only on forensic evidence, but also on a psychological profile of Christopher Hale. Expert witnesses were lined up to testify that he exhibited traits associated with calculated sociopathy, used to manipulate, a total lack of remorse, and the ability to lie with ease. He didn't just kill. He planned, observed, and removed obstacles like a strategist removing chess pieces. Every step he took had been calculated. The marriage, the hotel selection, the surveillance, even the staged crime scene. He hadn't counted on one thing: Savannah leaving behind breadcrumbs in the form of her investigation, emails, and scheduled meeting with the private detective. Prosecutors labeled the murder as premeditated, cold, and financially motivated. They argued that Christopher intended to marry, kill, and collect insurance money before vanishing again under a new name. The jury would hear how Savannah had tried to find the truth, how she hired a private investigator, and how her growing suspicions likely sealed her fate. But her courage also made it possible to expose the predator she married. The courtroom was already filling with anticipation, but one final twist remained: a twist that would take this already chilling case into even darker territory. For even as the evidence mounted and Christopher remained in custody, there were signs that he might not have acted entirely alone. The courtroom was packed on the day the trial began, a sea of solemn faces and flashing cameras, all drawn to the horrifying saga that had captivated the nation. Christopher Hale sat stoically beside his defense attorney, eyes forward, emotionless as the prosecution laid out its devastating case. Photographs, financial records, surveillance notes, and the forged life insurance policy were all presented with meticulous detail. The jury listened intently as the prosecution reconstructed the final weeks of Savannah's life, painting a haunting picture of a woman unknowingly trapped in a web spun by a man with a long, chilling history. Every step she had taken to protect herself now served as proof of her instincts and fear that ultimately became a prophecy. But just as the trial seemed to be tightening its noose around Christopher, an unexpected revelation shifted the entire courtroom's focus. A sapient witness. Jacob Cole, the private investigator Savannah had hired, submitted an audio file recovered from a backup cloud drive Savannah had set up before her death. It contained a voice message she had recorded the day before her wedding. In it, Savannah mentioned something unusual. She said that Christopher had been receiving late-night calls from an unknown number and that she had once overheard part of a conversation. A woman's voice. She couldn't make out the words, but she had a gut feeling that something about it was wrong. She also said she suspected someone had been inside her house while she was out one evening, as things were slightly moved but nothing stolen. Investigators traced the number mentioned in Savannah's phone log. It was registered under a burner phone linked to a woman named Rachel Knox, an accountant from Asheville, North Carolina, Christopher's ex-fiancée. She had never appeared in any of his records because their relationship had ended years earlier, long before Savannah. But, when questioned, Rachel admitted she had been in communication with Christopher sporadically, although she denied any involvement in Savannah's death. Her story began to unravel when forensic analysts traced financial transactions between Rachel's account and the shell corporation Christopher had created. She had received over $90,000, 0 cents, in wire transfers across 6 months. Under pressure, Rachel confessed that she had helped Christopher with document forgery and provided access to tools for identity manipulation and digital erasure. She claimed she thought she was helping him escape a blackmailer, not aiding in a murder plot. But her involvement was undeniable. With this twist, prosecutors restructured their argument to reveal a deeper conspiracy. Christopher had not acted alone. He had a willing accomplice who helped him create a new identity, forge Savannah's signature, and potentially spy on her through digital means. Rachel Knox was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and obstruction of justice. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Witness after witness recounted chilling details, while experts described the complex manipulation techniques Christopher employed to gain control over his victims. Savannah's friends and family sat through every moment, holding each other, some unable to hold back tears as photos and recordings played. When the verdict finally came, it echoed like thunder in the courtroom. Guilty on all counts. Christopher Hale was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Rachel Knox received a 20-year sentence for her role in the conspiracy. After the sentencing, a memorial was held in Savannah's honor at the community center where she once taught art classes to children. Her students, colleagues, and loved ones gathered to celebrate her life, not as a victim, but as a woman who fought to uncover the truth even when it endangered her. Her quiet courage ultimately brought a killer to justice and prevented more lives from being destroyed. In the end, Savannah's story served as a grim reminder that evil often wears a charming face. Behind Christopher's tailored suits and warm smile was a calculating mind that saw love as a means to an end. But his plan, no matter how carefully constructed, unraveled because of the instincts of a woman who refused to ignore the quiet signals that something wasn't right. Her betrayal didn't end in silence. It sparked a pursuit of justice that exposed a predator and revealed the terrifying cost of trusting the wrong person.